Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Talks with Mihai and Peter Engel on the core teachings, practices of the fourth way, the Gurdjieff, that was brought by Gurdjieff, as well as non-duality or Advaita Vedanta that we both explored and walked this path. And so we'll have another talk on the intersection between fourth way, non-duality, and how this shows up in the 21st century. And if you got to this video straight up, just know that there below you'll see a playlist link where there will be 40 plus episodes on that, on our talks, that we encourage you, if you are actually interested, to study and actually study from the point of view of attempts to practice and apply this. So yeah, what I want to start us off is something that we discussed briefly and we both realized, or you realized. Many people ask me when I teach the fourth way, they say, well, what are the other ways? Why is it called the fourth way? And in a nutshell, the idea is that also it's good to know that this teaching was brought in the West in beginning 1900. And the idea is that hundreds of years ago, throughout the history of humanity, before, let's say, 1900, anybody who was really interested in spiritual evolution and going deep, focusing one's life towards this pursuit of self-development, evolution, awakening, enlightenment, transcendence, knowledge of God. Statistically, anybody who was serious into that, they need to make a hard choice to renounce their usual conditions of life and their jobs and their family and their kids, as Buddha did. Buddha himself did that, apparently. So to renounce the usual conditions of life and go to some special conditions of a special container, an ashram or a cave or a monastery. And then the work will be there in those special protected conditions from the usual stimuli and the usual pursuits of worldly pursuits. And then the idea is that people will, depending on the path they chose, they will, first way will be working on oneself or trying to reach a higher level of being via mastering the body and transcending the body. So that was the avenue. The second way is to reach a higher level of wisdom and being through focusing on the heart and transcending the usual lower emotions and harnessing one's heart energies, kind of unified towards some kind of devotion, love, higher love, devotion, prayer, gratitude, deep longing to merge with the divine, so that is the second way, which could have appeared in, could appear in a Buddhist framework or in a Christian framework or in an Indian framework. This second way is through the heart. And then the third way was somehow to discipline and transcend the usual lower mind, and somehow using higher reasoning and insights and awareness to transcend the mind and reach the truth. But all of this, 1, 2, 3, they all require the renunciation of usual conditions. And that is why the fourth way was something unique and unusual, was that the quality of it was that actually it is required not to renounce the world and not to go to some special isolated place, but the ashram, the monastery, is one's own life and one's own responsibilities and challenges and work, government, family, money. So that was special about the fourth way. And also what was unique about that was that in the fourth way, the necessity to bring awareness and to discipline and transcend all of this. So work on the body, on the emotions, on the mind. So somehow doing all the other three ways at the same time while being in the midst of life. And that was the essence of the flavor of the fourth way. And this was happening in the history of humanity. In Sufi masters, often they had jobs and they had a family, and so there are different such variations of fourth way embodied spiritual life. But that was somehow unique and unusual. Anyway, we realized that, hey, things have changed, actually have changed a lot. And how things used to be, they are not like that. At least in the West, in Europe, in America, in the Western world, which is getting much more cosmopolitan now. This Western world is spreading like a like a disease or like a something that spreads throughout the humanity. And now a high majority of seekers or people who have a deep longing for higher knowledge, truth, enlightenment, they are all kind of in life. So that going to the ashram and monastery doesn't quite apply so much. It's not what's happening these days. And then we thought, well, this doesn't mean that the fourth way is done now. You know, fourth way is a thing of the past. Actually, we realized, no, this is the age of the fourth way. And it says to work on oneself in the midst of life, and this is the ashram. So that's what we wanted to start on that. And challenges, benefits of that. And as well as we want to touch in this topic, in this talk, somehow we talk both of the fourth way path and non-duality path. We both explored it. Many people who are watching this, I know they are exploring both. Can get confusing. It can get opportunity to have self-delusion, tricking oneself, jumping ahead. So we want to explore also a little bit like where do they intersect this exactly, where they overlap fourth way path and the non-duality path, and anything else on this topic. So if you have any,
it's also possible that the fourth way, and this is according to what I've read and what I was taught anyway, but it seems to me quite reasonable. The fourth way is not unique to the 20th and 21st century. It's possible there were periods in history when there was an openness and when there was, because to a certain extent, the reason people did go to a monastery or an ashram or retire to a cave was not just out of inner necessity, but due to circumstances, prevailing political and religious climates that looked down on, even from the point of view of the law, on people talking about ideas that went directly against, or seemed to go directly against, the church and against governments. And that we've been living in this age where that's not the case. We can speak openly, and there's so much now open on the internet and in books and in elsewhere. But I just felt it was worth emphasizing that the fourth way may not, it doesn't seem it's something new. In fact, Gurdjieff said the fourth way appears and disappears, has appeared and disappeared in history. But it's not necessarily recorded. You mentioned the Sufis, but it's just interesting to think about. And also that the fourth way, something that came to mind when you were talking, it's an idea we used to emphasize, and that is when in the past people went to a monastery or an ashram or just isolated themselves, they didn't necessarily do so with a complete understanding. There was a pull, there was an intuition, something led them, but they didn't proceed with increasing understanding. and especially with increasing consciousness. And so the fourth way explicitly says this is a way of understanding. It's not just a way of knowledge. You want to understand what you're trying to do, to accomplish, to reach, to become. And the more you understand that, the more value there will be, the more benefits you will reap in your inner work, your inner journey, your inner realization, your inner evolution. And therefore, understanding plays a big part in this. It's not enough just to go sit under a tree and try to meditate. There's so much more that needs to be understood about that. And this is why people do, sometimes they do go sit under a tree or something like that for a long time and nothing happens, because they are operating from their mind and from their body. And they never tap into this reality of awareness itself, consciousness itself, because that's what evolves, awakens, changes, transmutes.
Yeah, you're alluding to, I think Uspensky said this, that the more you understand why you're engaging in a certain practice or a certain tool, the more you understand why you do that, the more results you have. This alluding to this trap of having a mechanical practice, like a mechanical sadhana. Basically, I'm doing these things because they told me. I'm not sure why am I doing it, and I just keep doing it. Some kind of mechanical, repetitive something that I should do because somebody said that. Even somebody that I love and trust, and it's required actually. Even in non-duality, because I've been studying with Francis, and he was very much, Francis Lucille, he was wanting people to not have this rote, mechanical, rigid thing, to keep doing that. That will be actually you are killing it, basically. If one is just doing it mechanically because that's my discipline and I need to do that, it kills the love in it. It kills the freshness, the enthusiasm, and the idea is that the practice will be really alive and will produce things if it's alive, comes from understanding, from it's fresh. It's like a lover, a little bit. Like you can't be, it has to be fresh. So somehow to turn towards meditation or self-remembering, or just like we turn towards an ice cream or something. I mean, I know it's a strange metaphor, but it's like, yeah, I'm going to engage in that because of this or that. And I have verified that actually, if I don't engage in self-observation, self-remembering, then I'm getting swamped in turmoil, and then I have a lot of dilemmas.
Another thing that the fourth way, something interesting, you could say unique about the fourth way, when compared to a lot of non-dual teachings, is that the fourth way is the only system or methodology that I've encountered that speaks about these different states of consciousness, and that there is this, that we at sleep at night, we're in the first state of consciousness, and then in the waking state, we're walking and talking and accomplishing tasks. We're in what's called the second state. And normally, consciousness itself is not cognizant as itself in this condition. It's identified with our mind and body, with our four centers, and with this feeling of I in the mind and body. And the third state refers to when this consciousness begins to realize itself. It's not just the person now feeling I'm here. There's an awareness internally of presence now looking from, you could say, almost from the inside. And then beyond that, and that's called the third state. That's just one brief description of the third state. But because there are many aspects to this other dimension of consciousness than just that. But then beyond that, though, according to the fourth way, is this fourth state of consciousness. And this is where there's this more full transcendence of the feeling of the person, being the person, and more this self-realization, some call it realization of God consciousness, universal awareness, different, it has different names. But according to the fourth way, you can experience this fourth state, but it cannot really establish itself without having passed through the strengthening. Awareness has to realize itself, not just realize itself, it has to then accumulate self-realization and become stable. It's not stable. Even in this third state that we might experience, it quickly falls apart, dissipates. We're back in the mind, we're back in our thoughts and emotions, sensations, back in this feeling of I, me. And so this awareness can be a long period of accumulating, let's call it stability, awareness, stabilizing. And only then does it, let's say, become available for this much higher, broader, deeper realization about the universe and creation and life and so on. This, to me, is a very practical side of the fourth way teaching. The system that, and we'll get into it in a minute, I hope, to distinguish between the fourth way and the system that Uspensky and Gurdjieff taught. They overlap, but they're not the same thing. Fourth way is this way of experiencing this process of inner evolution in the ordinary circumstances of daily life. That is essentially what the fourth way is. The system is all this knowledge and tools and concepts that Gurdjieff and Uspensky brought to bear in the environment of the fourth way. But not a lot of the non-dual teachings that you encounter, they're talking about the fourth state. And they are kind of trying to induce the fourth state. And this is not easily had. And so the fourth way, it's funny, fourth way, fourth state, but the fourth way offers this practical truth about the transition from the second state, the ordinary feeling of being a human, to this very high, all-encompassing fourth state. And almost all the work in the fourth way, teaching from Gurdjieff and Uspensky, is exactly about recognizing the second state in ourselves and trying to propagate the third state. And the system taught by Gurdjieff and Uspensky doesn't speak a lot about the fourth state. It doesn't speak a lot about what happens once awareness is now stable enough to start transmuting at a very, very high level. It's now transmuting itself, transcending itself, going deeper into itself, into its source of itself. And anyway, it's just an interesting thing to think about. A lot of the non-dual teachings are pointing, the fourth way, they both point in the same direction. This is the thing, they have to. There's only one truth, one reality. And they point in the same direction. And a way I've seen it quite simply is that it's like a circle. And to me, and in the center of the circle is this awareness, realizing itself. And both the fourth way teaching and non-dual teachings and others, they share the circle in common. But whereas the fourth way is surrounded, also it includes this, they surround the center of they share the center of the circle in common, what I wanted to say. But the fourth way also includes the entire circle. And how do you enter that circle and then study yourself and know all these facets of yourself, which you're mistaking for identity. You're mistaking it as consciousness. And you need to know that. And by seeing that and knowing it, awareness can realize itself. And now suddenly you're at the center of the circle. That's when awareness is realizing itself. Whereas the non-dual teachings say, listen, forget about everything else. That's a generalization. I shouldn't be so, I'm not dismissing it by any means, but it's the idea, just go right to the center of the circle. Just go to the center of the circle, stay there. Everything will start revealing itself. And that would be true if that were possible. And I would say in the majority of cases, it's not possible for people. It is possible to discover. It is possible for awareness to discover what it is by virtue of seeing what it is not. And that's kind of the fourth way that Gurdjieff and Uspenski taught. Whereas non-duality is just discover who you are, what you are. You need not concern yourself with what you are not as much.
Yeah, this is a very essential topic with the four states. And yeah, so I'm kind of repeating what you're saying, but in a different way, because it's really essential, this idea that's practical for success or through progress. It's like these high teachings, they are talking about the top of the mountain, how the view is from the top of the mountain, and the view on the top of the mountain from the fourth state, the highest state possible to man, enlightened, being aware of the truth of oneself and the truth of all reality. Then the vista from there looks like, and there's a lot of literature about the vista from the fourth state that's very juicy and inspiring literature, wherein people say that I and the Father are one, Atman is Brahman, there is only one reality, wherever your eye falls, there is the face of God, there is only God, there's nothing but God. So all of those are what the sage sees from the fourth state. But the people who come to the sage, they are in the second state. They are in the state of being lost in imagination, daydreaming, in reactivity. The awareness is weak in a way that it's there. This awareness is there, listening to the sage and aware of some kind of fear in the belly. But it's weak in a way that it's lost, it's sucked into content all the time. And there is a lot of impurities, so to say. Impurities, meaning a lot of accumulation of lies about oneself and beliefs about oneself, and ways in which our emotion center is not working properly at all, where either it's inflamed and it takes over the whole being, or the emotion is not allowed and pushed down. So it's a lot of illusion that is dense. It's a lot of psychological suffering, and ever new mechanism of producing psychological and somatic suffering in the second state. Mind is full of thoughts, and maybe now it's full of spiritual thoughts, full of theory thoughts. All the Nisargadatta said this, and this Zen master said this, and Ouspensky said this, and so that's what's the second state. And awareness is not aware of itself. Yeah. So we can't jump from there to God is all. And I'm seeing people come to my group, and they are kind of using the teaching, the fourth way, but also they are inspired by higher teaching. I mean, by teachings coming from the fourth state, about the fourth state, and they are frustrated. They're like, yeah, I get it, but I don't feel it. I can't follow it through it. I can't go there. And it reinforces, oh, there's something wrong with me, or doesn't work or something. But the missing piece is like, hey, don't worry about that for now. And keep getting to the higher levels of the second state, because the second state has degrees, and getting more and more in the third state, where aware of what's happening here, aware of what's happening. This will be self-observation. We are in a
also, this idea of the fourth state is often part of the confusion and frustration that happens is due to thinking in terms of it being somewhere else, down the road. I'm going for it. I have to reach it. And actually, the fourth state is exactly in the same place as the third state and the second state. It's just deeper. It's both deeper inside and deeper, broader outside. But it doesn't, you arrive there by simply going deeper into the present with presence.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something we're going to, it's not next Tuesday. It's not waiting for us next Tuesday or next year. It's a matter of, and this idea of awareness establishing itself, accumulating itself. It means remaining present. Presence can't just come into focus and then just fall off the horse, dissipate, and then regain itself who knows when. It's regain. It's almost like a process of restoration, this third state. It really is awareness restoring itself to full capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And only then going to yet a deeper capacity. And another thing that's misunderstood, or perhaps not fully grasped, and it's because the mind can't really grasp this, except as a concept, and that is that these states that the fourth way refers to are actually different dimensions. They are different. The body is in the physical dimension, and the mind is in a psychological. It's not the physical dimension. Our psychology, our psychological world of thoughts and emotions and so on. They are not physical. This is now a whole other dimension, and it's what's called psychology. And then beyond that, this third state is you can call it a metaphysical. It's even more rarefied than thoughts, more rarefied than emotions. So it's actually it's a different dimension. And again, it's a deeper dimension in. You could say that each higher dimension is both inside each lower dimension in a more concentrated form, and each higher dimension is outside each lower dimension, encompasses it. But this idea that we do not proceed through these states in the same dimension, but this is how the mind thinks of it, and that's what it tries to do. We're talking metaphysics. We really are. We're talking different worlds, and the fourth way speaks about this. There are different worlds in us and out of us, outside of us. When someone is feeling that urge, they want that fourth state and they're frustrated, it's important to see that in yourself when that happens and look at that and realize something in you can see that frustration, can see that disappointment, can see that almost sadness too, because you can spend a lot of time trying to be present, and at certain times you'll come up upon periods where you feel so discouraged, defeated, and almost sad. Like, well, I wanted this. I mean, genuinely, I'm trying, and nothing's happening. What's wrong? And you have to see that. That's a psychological hurdle that has to be overcome, jumped over. And the only thing that can jump over it is a deeper level of awareness. Now you see Peter being frustrated, being discouraged, feeling defeated, whatever. And you go beyond that. Something goes beyond that. This awareness doesn't stop there. I think of Walt Whitman. I love the line from him. I'll try to quote it. Be not discouraged. Be not discouraged. I swear to you, there are beautiful things there are beautiful things enveloped. There are beautiful things. I can't remember it now. There are things there are things more beautiful than words can tell. Don't be discouraged. It's well enveloped, and It's more beautiful than you can think about or talk about. Be not discouraged.
Yeah.
Transcend your discouragement with awareness.
Yeah, with this metaphor of the mountain, like starting the second state, waking sleep, which like being in the woods, dark woods at the foot of the mountain. Dark and animals and creatures and dangerous and spooky and turmoil and unsafe, and then we need to kind of keep going for that, finding our way through this forest and start going up the slope, and then the forest will be less thick and then more light, and we are really transcending the thick, dangerous, bad turmoil, and it's better, it's lighter. So we can't skip this middle stage of going from the woods, dark woods of Mordor to the top of the mountain. So yeah, like you can't skip from but how to call that? What caterpillar? A caterpillar can't straight up become a butterfly. There needs to be a whole process happening. And I feel like that there's this element in our culture where it's like a quick results, quick thing, this kind of marketing, misunderstanding, quick, watch a video, do this, put some headphones with some special frequency and you become enlightened, or pay this money and do this for a week or two. So that is not true. And actually, if people offer that, it's a lie. It's a lie. It's a misunderstanding. It's a scam. It's naivete. One needs to be persistent and earnest, and the daily study and practice for many years. Actually, I heard Nisargadatta somewhere said that. He was like, it needs constant, daily practice, earnest for many years. And that's not so popular these days. And on top of that, there is this teaching, Neo-Advaita, where they are enforcing this. They're saying, hey, there's nothing to do. There's no need of practice. There's nobody to do it. It's just here right now, just this. So any attempt to do work on yourself, it just enforces the illusion. So yeah, so that is, that is some particular vista when one is really, really on the top of the mountain, really, really. But it's distorted there because one cannot get into the top of the mountain just like that, so to say. And so those teachings, I find them dangerous, actually. There's this quote, you might know it from, I think, let's see if I remember, from Cervantes, the Spanish writer and philosopher, mystic. He was saying this, which is what we are doing for a long time, the fourth way work, honest, earnest, daily work. Said when you are riding a horse and you fall off, you must stand up, dust yourself off, and get back on the horse. If you fall off again, you must stand up, dust yourself off, and get back on the horse. No matter how many times you fall off, you must stand up, dust yourself off, and get back on that horse. And one day, you will be like one who has never fallen. So this falling off the horse, why do we fall off the horse and get back on the horse? So, now the Ouspensky is Gurdjieff's obstacles, the study of the obstacles to the third state, this imagination, identification, unnecessary talk, inner considering, lying, expression of negative emotions. All of these are things that, as long as we have all those burdens and gremlins, they are going to knock us off the horse right away. We are not even on the horse. So working with those obstacles, and that it will do this, the so-called purification. And that will be actually the gradual renunciation and the gradual purification. And through the process of struggling with those forms of sleep, awareness gets a little more stable, and the impurities, they are getting lighter.
Also, what I call those 5 obstacles in the fourth way teaching, all of them can be seen as examples of where we do not have control of our attention.
Mm-hmm.
And before awareness can retain, let's call it control of itself, can hold this recognition of itself. Before that can happen, attention, and attention is it is an extension of awareness, but in a lower dimension. And these 5 obstacles refer to this, that this is really, they're due to a lack of attention. If you think about it, if you approach them that way, attention is not in control of itself. And the fourth way has a very explicit way of explaining this and what this means, and that our centers have different parts. And what are called the intellectual parts of centers, the highest parts of our centers, is where attention is controlled. And the lower parts have less, the lower you go, the less attention is under our control. And that's where these obstacles manifest themselves as such. And it's sort of, you use the analogy, Mihai, of climbing the mountain, going up the mountain. This is sort of going from the base of the mountain where there's little or no attention, and then making our way up the mountain to a point where now we can control our attention in all 4 centers. And this does not mean being rigid. This means simply being attentive. It's almost like a form of mindfulness. But it's not awareness realizing itself. It is the mind is really controlling attention in the mind and body. But this is, according to the fourth way, a necessary step. And it goes back to, this is how you bridge the transition from the second state to the third state. Attention gains enough control of itself that in actuality, that it can yield itself as attention to awareness. And then awareness can realize itself. And awareness can then go on to yield itself also. You could say to its source. And so this is all sort of broken down in excellent detail in this fourth way teaching as to what are we trying. It goes back to this idea of understanding again. What are we trying to do? When we're working in these areas, do we understand that we're trying to, in effect, really just regain control of our attention in the many facets of our life? Think about throughout the day, you're just operating with little or no attention in your movements, in your thoughts, in your emotional reactions to things. And so this is a large thing, achievement, you could call it, to gain more and more and more control. And it's really attention. It's this material. You see, we use that word. It's interesting. What is attention? What does that really mean? It has a lot of aspects to it. So this attention is gaining control of itself. And that is the foundation for awareness to begin to realize itself more and more often and achieve more and more stability, you could call it. More and more accumulative self-realization. And this is one description of what it is we're trying to, what spiritual work, spiritual evolution is about.
Yeah, even this awareness recognizing itself, that is quite advanced, very advanced. And so we can't bypass this of harnessing attention and just being present and attending to the phenomenal now. So this witnessing, in the fourth way they call it self-observation. Thich Nhat Hanh call it the energy of mindfulness. Whatever. Jesus would say, watch, ye, do not sleep. Watchfulness, mindfulness. Basically, having attention more in the present, keeping it more and more in the present, unless of course we need to make some plan for some vacation or we need to something. It's fine. It's okay to think about the past and the future as needed. But in the second state, that's all the time the disease of, Gurdjieff said, disease of tomorrow or the disease of yesterday. So to harness attention and stabilize it more, to be present to my movements, the thoughts, the sounds, to really be present to the world and the inner world, the outer world at the same time. Even that is very hard because we do this for 3 seconds, 4 seconds, and then we are bounced out into identifying with a thought or a comment or they think of me, they think I'm stupid. And that's a lot of reactive energies that are bouncing us from this state of just witnessing what's happening, just mindful living. And so that is important for listeners. We can't jump into awareness is God or I am that which is aware. That will be some kind of thought, some spiritual thought. And it's not realistic and is reachable if most of the day we are lost in imagination and identification. And so it seems like only when there's this stage of, with I guess, I don't know, there will be the man number 4, that is a man striving and working actively, earnestly, competently, skillfully, and effectively, keep coming less out more and more of the woodwork of confusion and coming out more and more. And then in
harnessing attention.
Yeah. But also we are supposed to, in the fourth way, we are supposed to not just, be, because the danger with this just mindfulness, be mindful all the time, you still don't know what is happening here. You don't know who is who, what I can trust, what I cannot trust, So I appreciate about the fourth way that they say, okay, once you have some more attention, you got to study your biocomputer, the machine. You got to study the different aspects of false personality. Studying meaning you notice it, you catch it, you notice it, you are witnessing it. If you can struggle against certain stuff. So only after that, all this reactive, the forest will, it's not that you go beyond the forest, but the forest can almost dissolves. So it purifies. There's less static, less clouds in the sky, The sky of our presence is not covered with clouds and cyclones all the time. Oh, my mother-in-law said this, oh my God, And only then when there are less clouds, it's more quietness, then there are chances with the right instruction and guidance for someone to say, hey, what is aware of? What is aware of these sounds right now? What is this which remains when the thought dies? Not as an intellectual thing, but as a pointer to basically attention, I guess, discovers its source. Not attention. The source of attention discovers itself.
Yes, realizes itself. In the fourth way, the whole idea of self-observation is meant to lead to and reinforce what is called self-remembering. These are really the 2 pillars of the whole fourth way teaching. And that word self-observation is interesting because it refers to both the self of awareness, observing, as this observing part, and it also refers to the self, meaning the feeling of ourselves as a person, our thoughts, our emotions, and all, being observed. What's being observed? And again, it connects to this idea that awareness, by seeing what it is not, can begin to realize what it is as just pure observing, pure awareness, pure seeing. But this, it can easily be misunderstood, because the body and the mind, the four centers, as the fourth way says, easily misappropriate. They appropriate awareness and want to then establish a feeling of identity from that. And you have to see so many different aspects of yourself to realize that's not it either.
Yeah.
That's not it either. It's not a thought. It's not an emotion. It's not a doubt. It's not a fear. It's not a hope. It's not a whatever. It's not a dream. And then slowly, this self-observation leads to this self-remembering, which is really self-realizing. The self-realization of awareness is what self-remembering ultimately refers to. Because you as the person can try to remember yourself. And I'm looking at the tree, and now I'm aware of myself here looking at the tree. But that's the person remembering themselves in this meaning in which the fourth way intends. And that's fine, that's good, but then it goes deeper. And then there's the realization there's something inside looking out, aware of being here looking out. So now there's not only the tree, and there's not only Peter looking at the tree. There's this awareness that now is, you could say, looking through Peter at the tree. And all of them now are starting. Now you see this dimension thing, it's opening up, it's changing. There's a deeper dimension inside, and now more is realized outside. And so all of these, again, this goes back to these obstacles in the fourth way. These are material for observation, such that this self-observation of oneself will lead to self-remembering more and more often and more deeply. Because you can become a sort of a bodybuilder of controlling attention.
Yes.
And that's not going to get you anywhere. That's just going to get your attention. It's meant to lead somewhere. This controlling of attention is meant to serve as a foundation. And to lead you to a doorway in yourself where this attention, and it's really where whatever this is that's controlling the attention, ultimately begins to realize itself more deeply.
Yeah, I was doing a little, engaging some meditative practice, I think yesterday, and then I opened my eyes, and then the attention went to an icon that I have, and then attention went to another icon or tonka that I have. But anyway, I realized, oh wow, this attention is doing that, but something is aware of the attention doing that. So somehow awareness is aware of the attention, how it. But I like that you brought this up. That's a.
May we pause for a moment?
Yeah. So you brought up the trap at some point of becoming a bodybuilder of being present.
Well, of controlling attention.
Yeah.
Which is sort of being aware of things.
Yeah.
Which is what attention is. The emphasis is on the thing you're aware of. And self-remembering in a higher form in the fourth way refers to this. Now where's this attention coming from?
Yeah.
And now that source of that attention starting to realize itself, cognize itself. And more now the emphasis goes to that.
Yeah. Well, my point is that I did that. I did that for many years, I think. And even, which is from one angle, one needs to tone this athlete of harnessing attention and to tone this ability to not be taken with every thought and go in the past or future. or to be listening to every inner voice, or to be taken by any reaction. So I practice this to, develop this, hone this, not be taken. However, and then, there are all these teachings, like at least how they are published, like Zen, here and now. It's all you need. Like now, just now, everything's an illusion. Be aware of each breath all the time. So somehow, I've even dividing attention like that. It wasn't just I'm looking at the icon, but there was this, I was doing this Uspensky tool to divide attention between where the idea is that you are aware of the icon or aware of the screen and aware of myself at the same time. And I was doing that a lot. However, actually a friend of mine, he was looking back, there was, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago or more, he would tell me, oh yeah, Mr. Awareness. He would kind of tease me. That I think he at that time already realized the nature of awareness is, and he could see me kind of trying to just have more awareness as a Mihai. There was the trap. There was Mihai. The misunderstanding was that, okay, it's me, which I didn't challenge, I didn't question. Me, Mihai, this body, practicing and having more and more awareness, and then if I'm going to have more and more awareness, then somehow something will happen. And so that was the trap. Ideally, I needed some teaching or some to be like, hey, but what is aware of this? It's not me, Mihai, aware, but it's awareness which is aware of Mihai, of this and that. So,
and this awareness, what you're describing, Mihai, is worth mentioning, pointing out also that this takes different forms in different people due to what the fourth way calls center of gravity. Somebody, for example, who's instinctively centered, whose center of gravity is in their body, in their sensations, will take this idea of being present and divided attention in a very physical way. And it's about energy. And that's why probably somebody called you Mr. Awareness, because they saw this intensity of energy building in you. Whereas another person, they're emotionally centered. Their life is more emotional. And they emotionally do this same thing. They strengthen this muscle of attention in their emotional center. And the emotional center wants to appropriate that and call that I'm more conscious. I'm now more.
yeah.
And that's not awareness either. And the same with the intellect, to be able to control thoughts or hold a line of thinking or study all sorts of things, whatever. It's just the intellectual center doing exactly the same thing, strengthening its own muscle with a lack of deeper understanding of how that can serve as a platform for awareness to realize itself. And so this is a great example of self-observation. This is observing, for example, your center of gravity in yourself. This is when it gets really interesting. When you start to see that your own center of gravity, this feeling of this core of yourself, is not a true identity. It is a concocted feeling of I that's surrounding you. It's based on your center of gravity. And now something else is seeing this. I say it becomes more interesting because prior to that, you're just noticing these little nuances. Oh, yes, I'm intellectually centered because I tend to think this way. I'm emotionally centered because I tend to react and operate with people in a certain manner. I'm instinctively centered, a moving center because of it. This is all very interesting. It becomes like a puzzle and you're trying to put the puzzle together. And it is interesting, but it only becomes meaningful when it's seen in the context of awareness itself.
Yeah, and in my journey, I was doing that quite professionally, like a professional athlete. And then, but from a misunderstanding of what awareness is and who or what is aware. So somehow in my path that was left untouched, and it was actually very, very helpful when I encountered the Francis's or Rupert Spira's teaching, Non-Duality, where there was the straight up definition that was helpful, the definition of consciousness or awareness. That was, which at least in the fourth way that I studied, there was no definition of that. And I think it's good to have a clear understanding of, so the definition was that consciousness or awareness or presence is that, whatever it is, which is real and is aware of these words right now. And so that somehow helped, somehow dislodged that. It's not Mihai is aware, Mihai is it's an activity. Mihai is an activity, and actually it's that which is aware somehow. And also Francis helped me to, because he could see that effort of more awareness, more effort, and somehow it was very helpful to gently try to have me stop that effort from a wrong place and have deeper insight of what awareness is, so that it was very helpful. And I dropped the fourth way map for some time, but then as I got through his guidance, I guess the glimpse about what awareness is and all of that, things started to purify actually much faster and more effortlessly in a way. And then I found myself that actually, whoa, now the fourth way teaching now is very interesting from this place. And now engaging in self-remembering, now it's much more truer self-remembering than just imagine Mihai trying to be more aware.
I can also see why in the past, or in the past, that a teacher would spend a lot of time working with students, disciples, followers, simply working on this area of controlling attention without going into an explanation, without trying to have them understand the true nature of awareness. This is what's interesting now. So many teachings and teachers are trying to introduce from the very beginning the true nature of awareness. And that's well and good. And in some instances, it can be intuited properly. But nevertheless, most people are beginning from the dimension of their mind, their lower centers. And when they hear that, as I said, depending on your center of gravity, you will clutch onto this idea of the true nature of awareness through your center of gravity. And so just because it can be introduced to you at the very beginning doesn't mean you're going to get it at the dimension, in the dimension from which it's being, from that it's pointing to. And it is interesting that even in Ouspensky's books, if I'm not mistaken, the word self-remembering, which is this true nature of awareness, it's not even mentioned until 100 or more pages into the book, which is kind of interesting. And it kind of follows that pattern. Well, before you can even arrive at the point where you can intuit this properly, correctly, accurately, you need some preparation. And there's still a lot of value in that approach. Why? Because then when you are introduced to it, you have a foundation of understanding that can hold that up and allow that to establish itself on its own in the right way. Otherwise, it is going to be misappropriated. And again, in almost all cases, according to one's center of gravity, what the fourth way calls you the center of gravity.
Yeah.
And at the same time, because we are in the 21st century, it is a time of the fourth way. You said that earlier. I feel that's true. This is the essence of the fourth way, what's happening now, living in the midst of ordinary daily life and the turmoils. and conflicts and demands of daily life, not shunning these and hiding away from them and being protected from them, but going through them clearly, consciously, as consciously as possible. That it is, in some way, it is appropriate that you can introduce from the very beginning this idea of awareness, this idea of self-remembering. You can begin with self-remembering, and from there use it as a station for performing self-observation. But in many cases, it has to be done the other way around. But somehow we live in this age now, and yet I still feel my perception is that it's not being grasped at its depth accurately by many, many people. It's being misunderstood, or it's being interpreted by the mind. And that's natural. That's correct. And that's why you had these schools in the past.
Sorry, I lost you. What is being misunderstood?
What awareness is.
Mm-hmm.
It's and this idea, well, there are many forms that it takes of being able to manifest things in my life if I want to, by thinking about them and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
It is true that awareness itself, this consciousness in these higher dimensions, well, I won't go there right now.
Yeah, there's a new contemporary forest with this. I mean, also, yeah, electronics, the phone in your pocket, and somebody called it like the altar in your pocket. That's the devotion, is the devotion, mechanical, a subconscious devotion to the phone, because I'm touching it. Usually most people are touching it first thing in the morning and touching it the last thing, the phone, and then they're the phone. It's an extension of the mind. And so the sages, they didn't have that, they didn't talk about that. Then also this barrage of bee influence, actually. Bee influence, it's basically knowledge that initially came from some higher consciousness. The knowledge was initially coming from higher consciousness, but then was removed from its source, from that sage, and then is plunged in everyday parlance and culture, and it enters into psychotherapy and psychology and new agey and manifestation and Instagram, Facebook, and workshops. And now there are all of these spiritual ideas that there is a kernel of truth mixed with, taken out of the context, twisted, some lies, all taken by the ego, how to make the false self more fulfilled. And that is I can see, I attract people coming to my groups, and there's like a full of this bee influence, diluted, distorted knowledge. Yeah, so.
And spirituality has become fashionable.
Yeah.
We also live in an age where it's become fashionable. And that's partly speaks to this atmosphere we live in now, culturally as a world. We can talk about all these things openly, whereas in many times in the past that wasn't possible. And now it can be. And because of that also, it's become fashionable, just as yoga has become a fashion. Now there used to be, 24 or 36 asanas, postures. Now there are 872 of them. I don't know. I mean, and everybody's made up names for them, and it's become taken on a life of its own, and it's quite external and physical, and it's not what it was intended at its origin, to be a vehicle for the transformation and transmutation of awareness. And the same with meditation. You can see it. There are many branches of it and facets of it and ways of using it and techniques, and people keep coming up with here's the best, a new, better way to meditate, etc. far removed from its original intentions.
Yeah.
It derived from a higher realization, just as the divided attention, that idea, that technique, that diagram of divided attention in Ouspensky's books, it came as a result of him having a higher realization. And then it was transferred into his mind as this kind of method. It was a way for him to just have a tool at the ready to help him return to awareness. But then it could easily become a thing unto itself, which we were talking about earlier, becoming a bodybuilder, a divided attention expert, instead of seeing. No, it was representational of, or a reflection of, the truth of what it is like to be in the third state, for awareness to know itself as the seeing, not just as the knowing of what it is seeing, but knowing the knower as the seeing, knowing the seeing as the knower.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, you're right. He had certain actual experiences that he actually described pretty early on in the life with Gurdjieff. He would just walk around downtown St. Petersburg, and at some point he managed to have quite a big chunk of time where he was in the third state. Anyways, I'm sure that he had the third state self-consciousness, and then he tried to have a cheat sheet for himself. Hey, what? And then he can really, actually in the third state, actually the attention is divided. Meaning that the attention is towards the phenomenal present, but when the attention is not all in the phenomenal present, there's aware of being. And somehow that was probably the trigger for him, good trigger. Oh yeah, just divide attention, he will go back to that. But I took it, it can be taken like, okay, well, you have to divide my attention between the tree and myself, to be aware of myself and the tree. So I took myself as the body-mind, the body-mind ego.
And his descriptions, particularly in his book, In Search of the Miraculous, they are well worth reading. How he started to realize, the awareness in him started to realize itself more clearly, more vividly. And he tries to describe that, and he describes it beautifully. And then, what he also describes so well is how all of a sudden awareness fell asleep again.
Right.
It lapsed out of self-realization and lapsed back into identification with what it was observing. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly he's gone again. And he doesn't realize he's gone again until many, many, many hours later, when once again he realizes. And also it's worth mentioning, Ouspensky was probably intellectually centered. And so this idea of drawing this diagram, something he could carry with him in his pocket, a tool, a technique, very well suited to the intellect, very well suited to the mind, but again intended to serve as a platform, not to become an end in itself. And I think the same could be said for, I'm not sure if Ramana Maharshi was the one to articulate the concept of I am as a practice. It existed before. I mean, even you see it in the Bible. I am that I am.
Nisargadatta was big on that, to be aware.
Nisargadatta, these 20th century teachers. But what I mean to say by it is, it's not really an intellectual idea, tool. It's more of an instinctive kind of bodily, at least to my perception it is. And it very well suited Maharshi and Nisargadatta, and both of whom had an instinctive, strong, especially Nisargadatta, very strong instinctive element, maybe instinctively centered. And so this resonated with them the same way the idea of divided attention resonated with Uspensky, and it served as kind of a lifeline. They could pull themselves back
Yeah.
to awareness using that lifeline.
I remember that I heard this from Ramana a long time ago, and I felt that it's very true, but I was above my pay grade. He was saying, whatever arises, be interested in that which is aware of it. Whatever arises, be interested in that which is aware of it. So that was recommending that will be a true self-remembering.
And this is another thing that the fourth way, it points out, because of these different states of consciousness, that what is called self-remembering has different degrees. And it refers to the same thing in different dimensions. But in those different dimensions, it manifests or is experienced, you might say, differently. So it's not one thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they in the fourth way teachings, they speak about it. I kind of speak like that too. From one angle, true self-remembering, awareness, the being aware of itself as well as the body-mind at the same time, it's really not accessible for quite a long time for people. It's not accessible, this true self-remembering. However, we are encouraged to remember yourself as much as you can, as often as you possible. Yeah. So I think there's this compromise, or helpful pedagogical compromise, that basically any attempt toward being a little bit less asleep, that can land as self-remembering. Coming, I catch myself lost in some negative scenario, like, whoa, just drop it, bring attention in the present, I'm aware, so I'm coming back to some kind of self-observation, being mindful. You can call that self-remembering for now.
It is self-remembering in that dimension.
Yeah.
And it's more than what most people are experiencing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this,
the analogy that came to my mind a moment ago, the image, Mihai, is that it's like a glass filling with water. You're trying to accumulate, awareness is trying to accumulate itself, and it's in this human body, it's in this human container, and it's now filling up, but it doesn't quite yet recognize itself. And there are moments where it recognizes itself more vividly, but then, as Uspensky described,
yeah.
it loses recognition of itself. But once the glass is full, now the water is overflowing. The glass can no longer hold the water. Now it's indubitable.
Yeah.
There's no question. Now awareness knows itself. It is established as itself. But only at that point does that happen. Before that, your glass can be almost all the way full, and you may still experience what we were talking about earlier, frustration, and why isn't this happening? And because the awareness keeps losing recognition as itself. And it does take this Cervantes. Every time that happens, you have to keep filling the glass. You don't know how full it is yet, or how empty it still is. You don't know. You just have to keep. And you do that because your being is drawn to that. It wants to keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, so to finish my idea, and I'll bookmark what you said, it's okay to consider any efforts towards being more conscious, whatever that I'm aware of, being embarrassed, and while they think of me, and I'm taking a breath through it and witness it and still say it or not say it, or I'm just aware of it. And any attempt to be less asleep, more conscious, that is self-remembering. However, this will change depending where we are at. We'll keep flowering this self-remembering. And it's very interesting because it's almost like paradoxical. For many people, for a long time, the awareness is the most elusive thing. It's elusive, like, where is it? I can't find it. I don't see the space. There's no space. There's a presence. What presence? It's somehow the eye cannot see itself somehow, you know. It's elusive. It's aware of all of that, but unaware of that it is the looking, yeah. And then for some people, at some point when the glass gets kind of full, then it becomes, they say, man, it's obvious, it's everywhere, everything, you know. They say everything that you are aware of implies obviously that there is presence, that it's aware of it, and it cannot be lost. It's always here. It's so obvious, it's so evident, you know. And it makes sense connected to your glass metaphor and water metaphor.
And also something you said, the mind is still looking for awareness, but it cannot see it. And awareness also cannot see itself, does not actually see itself.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be through realizing itself. But this is also kind of like a temptation to want to be able to know what it looks like or something. It's self-realization, the self-realization of awareness, awareness realizing itself. It's so curious it can know itself as this invisible presence without seeing itself, because it cannot be seen. It's not a thing to be seen. It's generating the light. It does not reflect the light. It can only things that reflect the light can be seen. And by virtue of seeing all the things that reflect the light, this light begins to realize itself.
Yeah, you are pointing to this classic inquiry or dilemma that is not discussed in the system, in the fourth way system, but it is discussed in the non-dual path, the tendency of objectifying awareness or presence and looking for it as an object, as a something, as a subtle feeling in the heart, or as maybe some light in the head, or as projecting a sense of spaciousness, but somehow wanting to, okay, which one is it? Okay, so let's be aware of being aware of awareness, just because the words like that, you know, then it, and because we are only used in the second state, we're only used to notice objects, we cannot conceive that actually we can't notice that. And so then the sage, the non-dual teacher, explains and say you'll never find it as a something, is that which is aware of it. So the bad news, you can never be aware of it as a something. The good news is that you are it.
It is itself. Yes, because people say, well, they hear that, I am it, and they're thinking, I am it.
You know, here, in my experience, it was helpful. Some almost manipulative, artificial means that came, like the water is thrown in the face. So it's like, whoa, yeah, it's wet. Like, you know, I remember I did that some years ago, the first time I did like a longer breath work that initially it brought all kind of weird sensations and energies and traumas, and then it settled somehow. I finished the breath work and I was just like, I don't know, half an hour or an hour is a lot, and somehow the breath work did something in a way that it quieted down all content. There was no thoughts, there's no nothing. There was this evident like being, and I'm using words, but it was evident there's something that is just is. And it was kind of shocking, because usually there's always something and the attention goes to the something. So what was the artificial means or the help was that temporarily the somethingness stopped. And when the somethingness stopped, like thoughts, feelings, dilemmas, It stopped, and the body is also fully relaxed. There's no tension in the body. No, the breath work does that too. No tension in the body. No. Then it's not that there's nothing. It's just the isness. It's just isness is so thick and so fulfilling. So for me that helped, either breath work or some psychedelic journey. The content of the ego was temporarily shut down, and there was a chance for the true nature to be aware of itself. But I want to caution, for me that came like that because I was interested in these things anyway. I was interested, I was exploring in this. So one can do a lot of breath work and a lot of psychedelic journeys and not have realization of the being.
Another thing this brings to mind is that when these things are undertaken in different ways, and they can refer to the body or to the mind, to any of the four centers. And it is that usually we are preoccupied with the contents of our centers.
Yeah.
Our centers are full of different, the instinctive center is full of all these sensations. The moving center is full of all these movements and all these visual things, because the moving center also visualizes three-dimensional space and objects. And then the intellectual center is full of all these ideas and concepts and thoughts and so on. The emotional center busy, buzzing with emotion, memories, anticipations, worries, affections, dilemmas. So each of the centers is busy with all these contents. And a lot of these techniques, some of which you described, Mihai, in my observation, what happens is something is done, a certain kind of effort is made, and it usually involves some kind of control of attention in the centers. The contents are sort of brought under control enough and calmed down, or exhausted in some instances, exhausted.
Yeah.
We used to work very hard physically for long hours, and that had created a very similar effect. And now what would happen is the centers themselves, the structure of the centers, not the contents, but just the structure.
The hardware, yeah.
The hardware. And so, for example, the structure of the mind is actually quiet. The structure. The thoughts are noisy, but the structure housing them is actually quiet. Just as the body, always moving, and the structure of the body is perfectly still. It's actually still. The structure, the hardware, as you're calling it. Mm-hmm. And the instinctive center, the structure of that center, it's always buzzing. We're always on guard instinctively, and lots of things are going on here in this instinctive center. It's a remarkable mechanism that we as an animal human being have as part of us. The structure of it is actually sort of very calm. The structure of it is actually quite calm. And our emotional center too, the structure of this emotional center has what I would call natural equilibrium, emotional equilibrium. It's not overwrought, doesn't get out of hand, doesn't lose, go crazy, and doesn't get too lost in even religious emotion. The structure itself is not those emotions. So what happens is all of these centers, their structure mirror in many ways, the attributes I just described mirror in many ways the nature of awareness itself, which is still, which is silent, which has a natural equipoise, and a natural calm. And when that happens to the centers, now this resonance, it's almost as though the centers start to vibrate at the same rate of density as awareness itself. And then that draws awareness into them. It's like now there's this there's a connection made, actually.
Yeah.
But a lot of these techniques, too much attention is often spent trying to fix all the contents of the centers and do something about them instead of trying to get to the structure. And in right order, prayer, that's what prayer is. really is trying to get at the structure of the emotional center, to its equilibrium, condition of equilibrium. Meditation, to get to the structure of the intellectual center, not just quieting the thoughts and focusing thoughts and doing all, but reaching the structure, experiencing the structure. And this is really essence too. Fourth way calls it out. This is essence in us, which is the very purest natural part of us as a human being. It's really the structure of our center.
Yeah.
And also, when you're more present, when consciousness is more aware and occupying more, filling the space more, this inevitably is what happens to the centers. They return just to their structure and they exist. And automatically the moving center will start to get more still. The mind will start to become more quiet. The emotions will balance out, as I say, this kind of equilibrium. And the instinctive center will calm down.
And more sharp.
But these techniques are kind of reverse. I was trying to do it in reverse to promote awareness. I'm sorry, what did you just say?
I was saying as there is less what is called selfing, or it's not a fourth way term, but this false personalitying, false selfing, as this is less or diminished on these veils, then the instinctive center sees it's more vivid, more sharp, vivid, and therefore now it touches the emotion center more. You usually see some people are more unconscious. They are the sea, or there's a wonderful sunrise, sunset, sunrise, and they're not touched by it. They are not even looking at it. They are listening to something, or they are chatting, and then somebody point, hey, look at this, wow, look at the sun. They're like, yeah. This doesn't touch one, but when these veils are diminishing, the thoughts are diminishing, there's more like the state that you described, then the scene is really orange, and it's powerful. It's touching, touched by beauty. The instinctive center and the emotional center are more receptive to the beauty, and the beauty is a very small step close to, well, what is that beauty? Who created that? I mean, it can get mystical really quickly.
And all of that's outside too, because then it becomes astonishing that one can perceive all this.
Yeah.
And then it becomes, what is perceiving all this, as well as what created all? How did all this come to be?
Yeah.
We have this capacity to not only be aware of things, and this, again, awareness is overlooked. It's underrated. The most underrated thing about our life. We can be aware. And not only can we be aware of things, this awareness can be aware as itself being aware. And this is the great mystery. This is what real mystics are about. This is the great mystery. This is the real mysticism, this deeper and probing deeper and deeper and deeper into this, the nature of this. That seems like a nice place to end our talk today, if you agree.
Yeah. And I'd like to tell people that, in this playlist, now, I believe we are somewhere like episode 40 or something, 45, 46. But especially in the first 20, we are covering very carefully and in detail, thoroughly, these concepts, practices, exercises. We talk here about the centers, about the wrong work of centers, about the obstacles. Also, we have, I think, one or two really great thorough talks about self-remembering, self-observation, mindfulness, this or that in the early episodes. So if you are interested in that, don't stay at this philosophical kind of inspiring level. I mean, you can, but if you want to actually reap the fruits of this, you need to get thorough. And also thorough, meaning that in the fourth way, actually the study of this knowledge is an important part of self-work. So first we study the maps, how to get out of prison. We don't just start digging haphazardly in circles with a spoon. That's not going to be very effective. So studying the knowledge, studying these things and trying to apply it. Yeah, but the study of the knowledge, the higher knowledge that comes in, and then trying to apply it and then ask questions, and so also one needs a context. And we are, so both Peter and myself, so we are deeply collaborating here, but we do independent work. So if you are drawn to either Peter or myself, so feel free to reach out, either one-on-one or group work, whenever your time is right, and you're tired of just looping in the forest of illusion and going for the same turmoil over and over with a little bit of remedial soothing phases and a little bit of and then back again. We are very in love. I mean, I'm sure I'm speaking for you too, but I know it's true. We are in love with this work and this knowledge and the application of this knowledge, and we are in love with collaborating or working with someone who is interested in that. It's the best thing to do with our time, right?
By all means, yes.
All right, Peter, thank you.
Thank you, Mihai, again. Thank you.